to Deep Sleep Stories. Thank you to everyone who's been listening. If these stories help you relax or fall asleep, a short review, comment, or sharing the podcast with someone who might benefit is a simple and meaningful way to support the show so that we may continue to offer it for free. Now, take a slow, gentle breath and let's begin tonight's story.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, a quiet little place where you can set your worries down and drift toward rest. Tonight, you will visit a solitary clock tower standing at the very edge of the Alps, where snow-soft peaks and silvery clouds cradle time itself. For now, there is nothing you need to do. You can let the day fall away. If you like, allow your eyes to soften or close them completely. Feel the weight of your body being held safely and gently by the bed beneath you. Notice the simple comfort of this moment, the support, the warmth, the way the air touches your skin. Take a long, unhurried breath in, filling your lungs like a calm tide rising along the shore. Hold it for a heartbeat and then let it go in a slow, soothing exhale. Imagine that your out-breath carries away any tension that has been clinging to you. Breathe in ease. Breathe out the noise of the day. With each breath, your shoulders can soften, your jaw can unclench, your hands can rest loose and quiet. There is no schedule here and nothing to keep track of. The only ticking of time that matters now is the soft, distant ticking of a clock tower high in the mountains, watching over a sleepy village beneath a sky of fading blue. Picture those mountains now, rising up in gentle shapes against the evening. Their ridges are trimmed with snow, glowing faintly as the sun melts into the horizon. Below them, a valley settles into a hush, the air turning cool and crisp. Lanterns glow in cottage windows, and far above them, on a rocky ledge, the old clock tower waits, tall and patient. When you are ready, you may imagine yourself drifting toward that quiet place. Not with effort, but the way a feather drifts on a soft breeze. The journey is easy. Each breath carries you closer, and the closer you come, the more calm you feel. Up on Alps' edge, there was a small village that rested like a handful of warm stones at the bottom of a steep green slope. In that village, the days moved slowly and the nights arrived with a peaceful certainty, like a beloved story told over and over again. The people there knew the hours not by watches on their wrists, but by the voice of the clock tower that rose above them on the rocky outcrop. The clock tower stood alone on that ledge, its stone base anchored deep into the mountain. Its walls were the gentle gray of weathered rock, touched here and there with pale moss and tiny white flowers that grew in the cracks. High above, a slate roof pulled up into a neat point, and from each corner, small copper bells gleamed dully in the thin mountain light. Behind circular windows of soft, wavy glass, the great clock face watched the world with patient, golden hands. Every hour, a low, warm tone drifted down from the tower. It was a sound that never startled, but rather entered the village like a uncomfortable friend stepping through a familiar doorway. Children would pause in their play just long enough to count the chimes, then return to their games. Bakers would nod, knowing how long their bread had left in the oven. Shepherds in the distant fields would smile, hearing the bells as a reminder that home was still there, waiting. No one exactly remembered who had built the clock tower. Some said it had always been there, carved from the mountain itself by patient spirits of stone and snow. Others imagined a quiet craftsman who had once climbed the steep path with a bundle of gears and springs, building the tower as a gift to the valley. Over time, the stories tangled together until no one knew where truth ended and legend began. The tower, unbothered, simply continued its gentle, steady work. At the base of the tower lived a caretaker named Ansel. He was a quiet man with kind eyes and hands that bore the marks of many careful tasks. Ansel had lived near the clock tower for as long as he could remember. His cottage leaned against the mountain just below the tower, a cozy place with a wooden door, a little garden, and a chimney that whispered smoke on cold evenings. Each morning, Ansel would wake before the first light touched the peaks. He would sit for a moment at the edge of his bed, feeling the stillness of the tower above him. Then he would move slowly through his cottage, lighting a small lamp, warming water for tea, and wrapping himself in a thick woolen sweater. He loved the quiet of the early hour, when the village below still slept and the world felt hushed, waiting for the day to begin. After his tea, Ansel would step outside. The air was usually cold enough to paint his breath in pale clouds. He would look up at the clock tower, its shape outlined against the sky, and give it a small nod of greeting, as if it were an old friend. Then, with steady steps, he would climb the stone path that wound up the rocky hillside toward the tower's door. The path was steep but familiar, edged with low, hardy plants and the occasional tuft of grass that clung bravely to the cracks in the stone. To the side, the mountain dropped away into the valley where the roofs of the village houses caught the first faint light of morning. Ansel always walked carefully, but he never hurried. The tower had waited through snowstorms and summers and countless seasons. It could wait a little longer for him each day. At the top of the path, a wooden door stood set into the base of the tower. Its surface was polished smooth by many years of use. Ansel would press his hand to the wood, feeling its familiar warmth, and gently push it open. Inside, the air was cool and faintly scented with metal and oil, like a quiet workshop. The light came in through tall, narrow windows, softening around the dust motes that drifted lazily in the stillness. The heart of the clock tower was a spiraling staircase that wound upward along the curved stone wall. Ansel began his climb step by step, the sound of his boots muffled by the thick runner that lined the stairs. With each step, the tower's sounds grew more distinct, a distant ticking, the occasional metallic sigh, the tiny shiver of chains moving over pulleys. On the first landing, a small wooden door opened into a room where Ansel kept his tools and journals. Shelves held carefully labeled jars of oil, boxes of tiny screws, and bundles of soft cloth. A worn table by the window carried open notebooks filled with neat lines of notes, dates, times, small observations about the clock's moods and performances. Ansel would pause just long enough to scan the pages, adding a brief mark in the margin, then continue his climb. Higher up, the ticking grew clearer, not loud but steady and soothing, like a gentle heartbeat. Another door opened onto a narrow balcony that circled the tower. From there, Ansel could look out over the valley, the village, and the long sweep of the Alps beyond. Sometimes he stepped outside for a moment, breathing in the crisp air. He would watch morning mist curl around the rooftops below, dissolving as the sun rose, and listen to the faint sounds of waking life drifting upward. Then he would return inside, climbing the last steps to the chamber where the clock's mechanisms lived. This room was the tower's secret heart. Gears of brass and iron turned slowly, teeth fitting into teeth, with patient precision. Chains moved with a gentle whisper, and heavy weights hung in the center of the room, guiding the steady motion. The clockwork was not loud. It murmured quietly, a soft, constant sound that filled the space with a sense of calm. Ansel moved among the gears as if walking through a small forest. He knew every piece, every polished tooth and gleaming rod. With practiced hands, he checked the oil along each axis, wiped away tiny flecks of dust, and listened to the turning of the wheels. If something was even slightly off, he could hear it, a subtle change in rhythm. But most mornings, everything was exactly as it should be. The clock turning time into gentle chimes that flowed out over the valley. From the clock chamber, the chimes were drawn upward through channels in the stone to the bells in the roof. When the hour approached, Ansel could feel a soft gathering of energy in the room, as if the tower were taking a breath. Then, with perfect grace, the mechanism engaged, lifting the hammer, guiding it toward the bronze bell. A deep, mellow note would ring out, followed by another and then another, each one separated by just enough silence for the sound to bloom and fade. Down in the village, people paused for a heartbeat, letting the familiar sound wash over them. They trusted the clock tower and its quiet keeper. Over time, the chimes had become more than a way to mark the hours. They were like a reassuring voice saying, "You are here, you are safe, the day is unfolding just as it should." Ansel did not mind that most people never thought of him when they listened to the chimes. He was content to be a part of the tower, almost as invisible as the gears hidden within its walls. He took pleasure in the small tasks, the careful adjustments, and the feeling of standing close to something that measured time, yet somehow soothed it, softened its edges. In the evenings when his work was done, Ansel would sit on a bench outside his cottage with a mug of warm milk or tea cupped in his hands. The tower rose above him, its silhouette dark against the deepening sky. On clear nights, the stars gathered around its pointed roof, and sometimes, when the moon was bright, the clock face shone faintly like a watchful eye. The valley below settled into quiet. Thin trails of smoke drifted from chimneys. Windows glowed with lamplight. Somewhere a dog would bark once, then fall silent. The sound of the clock's ticking carried down the stone wall behind Ansel, soft and steady like a lullaby only he could hear. As the seasons turned, the tower wore different clothes. In winter, it stood wrapped in snow and ice, its roof frosted white, its bells sometimes fringed with delicate icicles that caught the weak sunlight. The path to the door became narrow and crisp, lined with piles of snow, but Ansel still climbed it each morning, his boots crunching softly. Inside, the tower was cool but sheltered, its stones holding a faint memory of warmth. Spring would arrive with cautious colors, then deepen into summer's long, golden evenings and autumn's crisp mornings. Through every change, the tower held its place on the mountain's edge, its stones remembering snow and sunlight, its bells ready to sing each new hour into being. There came an evening one autumn when the sky was layered with streaks of pale violet and rose. The village had finished its harvest, and a gentle tiredness lay over the valley, the comfortable kind that comes after work. Well done. Ansel finished his rounds inside the tower and stepped out onto the balcony just as the first stars appeared. From this high perch, the world looked peaceful and small. Lanterns glowed like tiny embers scattered through the village. Down by the river, a faint mist gathered. The air was cool against Ansel's face, and he could hear the soft, distant murmur of voices rising from open windows. As he stood there, the clock behind him began to prepare for the next hour's chime. Ansel could feel the subtle shift in the mechanism, the way the gears aligned their teeth, the delicate tightening of chains. He knew every part of the sequence, had watched it countless times. Yet in this moment it felt almost like magic. The bell rang out, low and rich, flowing over the valley. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 gentle strokes. As the last note faded into the growing night, something stirred at the edge of Ansel's awareness. It was not a sound, not exactly. More like a soft, inner pause, as if the tower itself had taken a breath and then held it. Ansel turned, his hand resting on the stone railing. Inside the chamber, the gears continued their slow motion. Everything appeared as it always did, polished, steady, familiar. Yet there was a delicate difference in the air, a faint shimmer, like light bending through water. He stepped back into the clock room, listening more closely. The ticking continued regular and calm, but behind it, he sensed another rhythm, something quieter, almost like the echo of a distant heartbeat. He closed his eyes, letting his other senses take over. The stone beneath his feet felt solid. The faint scent of oil and metal surrounded him, and that new, almost imperceptible thrum lingered at the edge of his awareness. Ansel did not feel afraid. The tower had always been a place of comfort to him. Instead, he felt a curious warmth, a sense of being gently watched, not by eyes, but by something older than sight. He opened his eyes, laid one hand on the nearest gear, and spoke in a low, friendly tone. "Thank you," he said softly, "for keeping such good time." It was a simple thing to say, and perhaps a little odd, talking to a tower of stone and metal, but in that calm, twilight moment, it felt exactly right. The faint new rhythm seemed to deepen for a heartbeat, as if the tower were acknowledging his words, then settled again into the background. From that evening on, Ansel noticed small changes. Nothing abrupt, nothing that disturbed the steady flow of hours. The clock remained accurate, the chimes rang out as they always had. But every now and then, when he climbed the staircase at dawn or rested against the stone wall at dusk, he would sense that quiet awareness, like a friend sitting beside him in comfortable silence. There was a child in the village, a quiet girl named Mina, who loved the sound of the chimes more than anyone else. When she was very small, she would stand at her window with her hands pressed to the glass, waiting for the bell to ring. As she grew older, she began to count along, whispering the numbers under her breath. One day in late spring, Mina climbed the path to the tower with her mother. She had begged for weeks to see where the sound came from. Ansel opened the door with his usual welcoming smile and invited them in. Mina's eyes grew wide as she stepped into the cool stone interior. They climbed the spiraling staircase slowly, Mina's small hand wrapped safely in her mother's. Ansel walked ahead holding a lantern, even though the daylight filtered in through the windows. As they passed the tool room, Mina peered in at the shelves of gleaming instruments and tidy boxes. When they reached the balcony, Ansel opened the door and let them step out into the mountain air. Mina gasped softly at the view. The village looked like a cluster of little toys, the fields like swaths of cloth laid gently over the earth. The wind brushed against her cheeks, cooler and cleaner than the air below. She turned her face upward to the tower roof, staring in wonder at the bells. "Do they get tired?" she asked, her voice small but earnest. "The bells and the clock and all of it? They've been ringing so long." Ansel smiled, leaning on the railing beside her. "I don't think they get tired the way people do," he said. "But I think they like the quiet moments between the hours, just like we do." Mina considered this, then nodded, apparently satisfied. They went back inside, and Ansel guided them up to the clock chamber. He showed Mina the great gears and weights, explaining in simple words how they worked together. She listened with wide eyes, occasionally stretching out a hand but stopping just before she touched anything, as if the machinery were a sleeping animal she did not want to disturb. When the next hour approached, Ansel invited Mina to sit on the stool where he often rested. The three of them waited in the soft, humming stillness. Mina's mother watched her daughter's face, the way her eyes focused, the way her shoulders relaxed. Then the mechanism engaged. The weight shifted, the hammer lifted, and the first chime rang out. The sound filled the room and flowed outward, passing through stone and air, carrying across the valley. Mina closed her eyes and smiled. In that moment, the clock tower, the child, the caretaker, and the village below felt gently connected. like beads on the same quiet thread of time. Years continued to pass, as they always do. Children grew taller. Seasons cycled through their colors. Somewhere in the world beyond the mountains, cities changed and hurried. But on Alps' edge, time unfolded in its own slow, peaceful way. The Clocktower watched it all, patient and steady, its chimes like a deep, familiar breath. Ansel grew older. His hair silvered, and his steps up the staircase became slower. Yet he continued his work with the same careful devotion. On cold mornings, the tower seemed to wait for him, its stones holding the faint warmth of yesterday's sun. On warm evenings, the balcony offered him a place to rest, to watch the sky darken around the tower's quiet form. One soft, clear night, when the stars seemed especially bright and close, Ansel sat alone in the clock chamber. The lantern beside him cast a small circle of light on the turning gears. Outside, the wind had calmed. The world felt paused, held in a gentle hush. He rested his hand on the central shaft, feeling the slow, steady motion. The faint rhythm he had known for so long seemed a little stronger tonight, or perhaps he was simply paying closer attention. He closed his eyes and breathed in, while the clock ticked. Breathed out while it ticked again. "Thank you," he repeated, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "For every hour, for every quiet moment." In the stillness that followed, he sensed a warmth move through the stones, radiating gently outward. It was not heat in the usual sense, but a kind of deep comfort, like a blanket being drawn up over shoulders. The clock tower seemed to exhale, its unseen heartbeat aligning with Ansel's own. For a long, uncounted stretch of time, the two rhythms moved together in perfect, peaceful synchronicity. Down in the village, people slept. Dreams unfolded behind closed eyes. The wind traced gentle paths through the trees. The mountains watched, calm and unchanging. And above it all, the clock tower turned the night into something soft and measured. Each tick a tiny lantern glowing in the dark. The hours slipped past one after another. The world did not rush. There was no need. The tower kept its steady watch, patient as ever. Its chimes, when they rang, did not disturb the sleepers. They flowed around them instead, wrapping their rest in a quiet assurance that time was being held, cared for, and gently guided forward. High on Alps' edge, the clock tower stood, its stone walls touched by moonlight, its copper bells glowing faintly. Inside, the gears turned, the chains whispered, and the unseen heartbeat of the tower matched the breathing of the valley below. In this harmony, there was no urgency, no demand to wake or move, only a soft, enduring invitation to rest. Now, as the story settles, the tower continues its watch in the background of your mind. You may imagine it there whenever you wish, a tall, gentle guardian at the mountain's edge, measuring the night, not in pressure or demands, but in calm, steady breaths. Let its rhythm guide your own. Feel your body growing heavier, more relaxed. Notice the way your limbs sink into the mattress, the way your shoulders ease, the way your jaw loosens. The space between your thoughts grows wider like the quiet valley spread beneath the tower, open and calm. You do not need to follow every detail of the story now. You can let it blur and soften like distant chimes heard through half sleep. The tower will go on turning its gears, whether you pay attention or not. The hours will slip past safely. Your only task is to rest. Allow your breath to slow, matching the gentle ticking you imagine in the tower's heart. Each inhale brings in quiet. Each exhale releases the remnants of the day. There's nothing you must remember, nothing you must solve. The night is kind, and the clock tower keeps watch. If your mind begins to wander, it can drift back to the mountain once more. See the tower standing tall against the sky. Feel the cool, clean air. Hear the soft, distant chime of a bell fading into the stars. Let that fading sound carry your awareness downward into a deeper layer of rest. The village sleeps, the valley is still, the gears turn slowly in the heart of the tower, and the world outside your window carries on without needing your attention. You are free for now to let go entirely, sink into the mattress, sink into the quiet. Let the image of the clock tower grow dim, its outline softening, its stones dissolving into darkness and stars. Only the feeling remains of being watched over, of time moving gently, lovingly all around you. Good night, dear traveler. May the chimes of Alps' edge guide you into deep, peaceful sleep. Rest now, sleep well.